the ego death one. Okay. This is Elena. So it is possible, or is it possible to have an ego death many times? The last time I felt that immense pain, I felt like the person that I cried for was gone forever. I remember mourning him and saying out loud, "No, please stay here. Don't go. I love you so much." And I've said this over and over again, and I felt like my skin was being ripped from me. That's why I think it was an ego death because it felt like a goodbye forever. But I stopped because it was too painful. Maybe that's why it was so painful. So my questions are, what was that an ego death? And then is it possible that this particular situation will be back until it remains nothing there? Like it will be a part two in that particular ego death. So I said this to Joe before. So ego death, it's funny how I think that even, I may be wrong, but there are people that think there's just one. And that's the ego convincing you, oh, don't look at this stuff anymore, right? Some people say, oh, I've had my ego death. And it's like that was just one. There's like thousands, probably thousands of parts, so thousands of ego deaths from, let's say, from the beginning to fully enlightened. So there's probably 1,000 or more. And um,
And you can call it an ego death experience as well, because it's
yes.
like it's an aspect, the thing I said about the ego itself becoming a bit less opaque. Every time that happens, it's less recognizable as itself, and part of it's gone. And that could be like an ego death experience, or the experience for a moment that the self that you know or believe to be there isn't present for a moment. But the permanent ego death, real ego death, is when it's gone and is never coming back. But yeah, as Steve said, that this experience is a frequent, a frequent one and an inevitable one that comes back time and time again.
Yeah, and I was going to add that you could think of every emotional release as an ego death, but I think what is much more significant that people would consider an ego death is when it is something very, very extreme that happened. So she said, I felt um, my skin was being ripped from me, or, I think I talked about it before, how there were certain moments, and they may still happen to me. I think it happened today, but it doesn't happen all the time. So I could cry like 100 times, and it might happen like twice. So you could call those 100 ego deaths if you want to call it little emotional releases. But then when something really big happens, right? Something that involves someone, like if you heal something, if you have a conversation, for example, with your mother or father, and they admit something to you, like they hurt you and they've never done this, and then you felt in that moment absolutely loved by them for the very first time, and then you go home and then you cry and you cry. It's like that part of you, or maybe a bigger chunk of your ego, finally got what it wanted, which was love, and then it's dying, right? So for me, every single time a major one of these has happened, every time I thought I was going to die for real. So I thought, today's the day that I die if I go outside, and I actually wouldn't. And I was like, whatever. I'm afraid. I just let myself be afraid. I was like, I'd better not drive because maybe I'll die right now. So that would be a more classic ego death. A part of maybe a bigger part of the ego is dying, and therefore you feel like you're actually dying. You might feel like you're going to have a heart attack. Even if your heart is racing, that's what I thought the first time. My heart is going so fast, I'm out of here. Like I'm literally done. And the other thoughts that also come with ego death is because it seems like you're going to die today or in a few minutes, you're going to have weird thoughts like, I don't want to say goodbye to the people that I love. Like I want to stay here. Like I plan to travel and I plan to do this, but I don't want to die. So you have these weird experiences of you're perfectly healthy, but somehow in your mind you're like, I'm gonna die and I want to live much longer. That would be a classic ego death.
Yeah. And just to make it crystal clear that the ego is still very much there,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and it's an enormous, enormous thing that um, just takes a very, very, very long time to change.
Yeah, I think I in one of my videos I to have like a visualization of the ego would be these like metal boxes, but then the entire ego. Imagine that these little square metal boxes are little parts of the ego, right? And you can have one category. For example, all of your tears will be 3,000 boxes. And then you have your rage, another 2,000, fear, like all of the, thousands and thousands. So you have all these little metal boxes and they're all stacked on top of each other. But you can't open all of them at once. It's just not possible. So sometimes fear will be triggered and you open a little box. There could be bigger boxes. So those could be um, bigger amounts of the ego. So that's when you feel something very extreme. So that could be a classic ego death. But even if you eliminated, so for me, I've cried like 1,000 times and all this stuff. Who knows? Maybe I did 30% up until now, 30% of the ego. So the 30% of these metal boxes, and I already experience like life in a way that I never thought possible. But I still see that there's so much more pain to feel.
Yeah.
So that's a good example. It's like you got rid of, let's say there's like 7,000 boxes, and then that was like literally maybe one big box, and there's like 7,000. That's to make it as realistic and not like a dream or a fantasy that we're giving you here. Like, oh, you're almost done. Like it's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
And the ego will always want to think that it's nearly or close to be done or to be like all
Oh
of
yeah.
it done. Um, and it's always a million times more than you could possibly than the ego can accept because it hates that.
Yeah, I mean, after every meditation that I do now, there's like this little thing that says maybe this time it's different. And that's fun too, right? I was at the park, the same thing. I was staring at everything. I felt like almost completely enlightened. And then I said to myself, I think it's over. The voice of the ego saying it's over. When the
Yeah,
voice is gone, maybe you're closer.
yeah.
And then do you think one more and then we'll wrap it
Well,
up?
I was seeing that there's only two more on the list, I think, right? So maybe we can
Yeah.
just finish them and then we'll have a clean slate for next week.